Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button, and your membership options for citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. And today I want to do a little bit of a couple of things. I want to react to Mike Winger. Yes, I know, it's Mike Winger. I also wanted to touch on an argument against the existence of God. I normally save that for Thursdays, but I felt that seeing this was a reaction video, I'd hit the Divine Hiddenness Argument a little bit. But I also want to revive my series a little bit of helping the apologists. And I have watched this video that Mike Winger did about a question about divine hiddenness several times. And I'm now convinced that if apologists keep doing this, they're going to create more unbelievers. And I'm going to try to tell them why. I'm trying to help them out. I know that they always don't, as an atheist, they don't always accept my advice on how to fix their apologetics, but I'm going to give it another try anyway. So Mike is going to take it away here in a few seconds and present the question that he was presented about divine hiddenness.
The hiddenness and silence of God is causing me doubts. Is there any advice or help you can offer, such as that God is silent now because revelation has been completed with the New Testament? Thanks.
So the questioner comes to Mike Winger because he wants some advice. Mike is apparently somebody he admires. He apparently is a Christian, but the hiddenness and silence of God is causing him doubts. And he comes to Mike to offer him some sort of advice or whatever, or help he can offer. Something similar into the veins of, because the revelation of Scripture has ended, which is a theological argument most Christians make about divine hiddenness, that, because we don't need any more revelation of God, because we have the New Testament, we have the revelation of Jesus Christ, so on and so forth, then we don't need, any more revelation. So it's okay for God to be hidden because the final revelation is already there. But this questioner apparently doesn't find that satisfying, and I'm going to tell you as a former theologian, or still a theologian, an atheist theologian, yes, and as somebody who wrestled with this question themselves, he's looking for something a little bit more philosophical, theological, that can go along with the end of the revelation being the New Testament, because he realizes there's some problems with that. Like, number one, there are some Christian groups that don't think that the New Testament is the final revelation. If you take the Mormons are essentially a branch of Christianity that thinks that Joseph Smith added to that revelation. There's also other religions that add to the idea of additional revelations of nature and things like that. So is the New Testament the final revelation? Is the Bible with its 66 books the final revelation? Is a questionable thing to say, considering how how it's canonized. So the questioner is asking a very important and serious question from their own personal view, because they're saying they're personally having doubts, and this argument about the end of Revelation is not being sufficient for them. And they wanted to know from Mike, from Mr. Winger, in order to avoid confusion, I'm going to call the commenter Mike, and we'll talk about Mr. Winger as Mr. Winger. So, but he's asking him, hey, is there something else like this that, can add and clear up my doubts and confusion? And so I want to point out that there's a philosophical side to this, and Mike will do this, and Mr. Winger will do the same thing. But Mike is bringing out, I'm looking for, a philosophical, theological argument that can deal with my own personal problem with divine hiddenness, okay? And he doesn't really bring up, how much or how hard he is searching for God, but Winger will try to bring that in. But the question is more of, do you have any other philosophical or theological arguments that will deal with the divine hiddenness question? And it's an important question to the questioner, because on an emotional level, and we'll talk about this as the video continues, but on an emotional level, and I've asked this question on an emotional level many, many times when I was struggling with my own faith and eventually discarded it, because I came to realize a lot of different things about the divine hiddenness argument, and it became a very strong argument for me to at least abandon Christianity. Because the divine hiddenness argument isn't so much against God per se, but a particular type of God, namely a God that loves people and intervenes in their lives. Okay, and offers them advice, builds them up, and has this relationship. It's a very key issue to those who desire relationship with their God. And so the divine hiddenness argument says, I'm not really getting any of that revelation. I'm not really feeling any of that from God. I know there's good reasons for this, but can you give me something else? And so I think that's where the questioner is going. Well, let's see if Winger, actually answers his question.
So, Mike, the hiddenness of God is one of it's simultaneously a philosophical argument against God's existence, or at least against God's love. And on the other hand, it is also a very emotionally heavy and influential argument. Often the more philosophical arguments aren't emotionally very impactful, I think. A lot of times, like I look at, say, the Kalam cosmological argument, I go, that's a really good argument for God's existence, but I don't know how much it strikes people's emotions. I look at the moral argument and I go, that one hits people's emotions and it's intellectually strong as well. So that's interesting. This kind of hits both.
Well, at least Mike here is acknowledging that the hiddenness argument does hit kind of both sides of the rational side and the emotional side of faith. And he is at least acknowledging that. And, it's nice to hear somebody, actually admit that the moral argument is more of an, I think he is kind of admitting that it's a very emotionally satisfying argument, which is actually more of its strength. I would argue that the moral argument is more emotional and less intellectual because they haven't proven their premises. But he does at least acknowledge that in the case of divine hiddenness, it does have a philosophical side and it does have an emotional side. The question of why philosophically somebody would, not be approached by God who is sincerely seeking him is a philosophical question. And then on the other hand, especially if that God desires relationship with humans. Okay, the other side, it is emotional because a lot of people struggle with their faith, along these lines because they keep looking for God. God seems to be hidden. I remember reading Richard Foster. He would talk about this as going through, this trough, this valley of not hearing from God. And, you just got to get through it kind of thing, fake it till you make it kind of thing with him. And he didn't say that, but that's kind of the way I interpreted it. And from my perspective, it was a little bit different because I was coming at it from a standpoint of I already believed I had found God and I already believed that God wasn't hidden. But I began to realize that I could be, through confirmation bias, through a lot of other psychological things, have created this God in my head, and that my experiences with God were already indoctrinated for me to interpret any emotional experience as an encounter with God. And so I was beginning to realize there were alternative explanations to me having found God, that it didn't really prove that I had found God. And so I began, that sincere search of continuing to try to find God. And I did it on theological grounds. I did it on emotional grounds. I did it on philosophical grounds. I was attacking everything to try to get rid of the divine hiddenness problem for myself. And he's right. It is an emotionally, it's an emotional struggle. It's a mental struggle. And you really, if you're going to be effective in answering this question as an apologist, you have to hit both sides. Well, let's see if Mike does that.
And the hiddenness argument goes something like this. And I'm just going to, something like this. I don't have a syllogism before me to present to you, but it goes something like this. Hey, if God really loves people and he wants them to know him and he wants them to follow him, then he would make efforts to reveal himself to those people, right? So if you had a sincere non-believer, a non-believer who was sincerely looking and searching for God, but not finding God, that would perhaps prove that God doesn't really love them and want them saved. Because look, they're sincere and they're trying, but they're not finding. So there must be some fault in God because their motives, intentions, and methods are right. this is the divine hiddenness thing. God's hiding from this person, this hypothetical person.
Well, I'm going to give my friend Mr. Winger a props for kind of stating the divine hiddenness argument very effectively. He's done a pretty good job of laying it out, even though as he admits, he doesn't have a syllogism in front of him. But what we're going to see is he kind of misses part of the argument of the idea of God who loves people would be proactive in trying to find, a person that is genuinely seeking him. And what we're going to, I think Mr. Winger is going to start doing some things that I find very interesting. But one of the things I'm trying to help the apologist out. What he is about to do, and spoiler alert, what he's about to do is blame the person instead of engaging the actual argument. Because part of the divine hiddenness argument that he seems to gloss over is the idea if God genuinely has passionate love for human beings and he wants a genuine relationship with them, there should be a hell of a lot of effort on his part to reach out to them. That it's not just a question of a person seeking God, but God should be seeking them. He should be, the eyes of the Lord go to and fro, looking for those that are seeking him. Okay, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I don't know if I have the verse exactly correct, but there is an idea in Scripture that God is looking for people who are seeking righteousness. He's looking for, that there's this understanding that it's a two-way street. And what Mr. Winger is about to do is basically put it all on one side of the street. And he's basically going to effectively avoid it. But let's show you how he does this.
There's a few ways to poke holes in this argument, okay? Logically speaking, I think. One is to challenge how much sincerity is really going on in this person.
Right out of the gate, let's challenge the sincerity of the person seeking. How really much are they seeking God? Okay, so we're not even going to deal with half of the question of if God is a loving God, that he would be very proactive in searching out, or the fact that the scriptures, the Bible scriptures that Mr. Winger believes in, openly say that God is searching the world for people that want to love him and is ready to reveal himself to them. We're going to avoid all that. We're just going to go right for attacking the person. This is, it's funny because he says the logical thing I can do to attack this, but that's not a logical thing he's doing. He's actually engaged in ad hominem. He's going to sit here and attack the sincerity of the person seeking God. Now, as a former minister, I never did this. Okay, and the reason I didn't do this is because I knew that if I did it, it's basically an open admission that I don't have any more theological or philosophical arguments against the hiddenness argument. Okay, and that I'm basically just acquiescing to the fact that I don't have anything philosophical. I don't have any way of explaining why God doesn't seem to be as proactive as the scriptures say he is. Okay, and so I would be being very dishonest and saying, okay, well, I need to look at both sides of this equation of relationship. Like I need to be looking at the side that says, okay, yeah, maybe the person isn't sincere, okay? But I also need to be looking at the side of, well, what if the person is sincere, but shouldn't God be finding them? Isn't God actively proactive in his love? Okay, and this was the theological question I wrestled with constantly because I was a theologian approaching this question. And so I was asking the theological question, can I conceive of God where God would have a passionate love for human beings, who would send his son to die on a cross for them and all this other stuff, okay? And I know the divine hiddenness argument stretches into other religions, but I'm going to use mine, the one I know the best, as a good example. If that's the case, then why wouldn't he still be revealing himself to each individual in order to, get that relationship going? Why wouldn't he remove the doubts of a person that he loves them by revealing himself even further? And so it's what made, to me, the theological side of the argument unsatisfying. Because it's like, no, I don't think the New Testament is God's final revelation. The Bible seems to continue to indicate that he reveals himself to each person. I mean, if you take Romans 1:18 through 20 seriously, like many Christians do, then you would have to say that God has actively revealed himself to everyone. And so you can't have it both ways. If God is actively revealing himself, there should be some evidence of that. But what Mike does almost immediately is he attacks the sincerity of the person, which is a personal attack. It's not an argument. It's not a logical argument. It's a fallacious one if it is. Okay, and so he's automatically going at, and I'm going to tell you, this apologist, and I know you probably won't take my advice. I'm an atheist, so you just don't really take my advice most of the time in how to fix your stuff. This will absolutely drive people more to the unbeliever camp. It's why it's happening. This is the sad, sorry state of apologetics, where they don't really have a good argument against divine hiddenness. And so they attack the sincerity of the person seeking because that's all they've got. And it's cowardly. I'm going to be honest. It's cowardly. Okay. And you need to be a little bit braver and actually explain why God, who passionately loves human beings, who's sacrificed his son or whatever, if you're a Christian apologist, or he sent Muhammad or whatever, and God really genuinely wants this relationship with his creatures, why he does not act more proactively, okay, to get it, or doesn't seem to act more proactively. Make a list of where he actually is being proactive and we just don't see it or whatever. But you don't do this. This is how you create more unbelievers. This was one of the things that when I was analyzing apologetics, when I was struggling with my faith, that I found very frustrating. Because a lot of apologists, they hear questions like this. Everybody does it. Frank Turek, all of them, because it's like they're openly acquiescing when they answer the question this way. Well, I don't really have any good reasons why God doesn't seem to be proactive or hidden. And so I'm going to blame the sincerity of the person saying they're seeking God. And what we're going to see in the rest of this video is basically Mike doing this, Mr. Winger doing this over and over again. And the problem is I'm getting back to the guy who originally asked the question, the guy Mike who asked the question. And it's like, he's being sincere, okay? He's really having a struggle here. And you're about to basically attack him for even asking the question. How dare you? I'm questioning your sincerity, okay, if this is really a struggle. Okay, and so we'll see what Mr. Winger does.
That while they believe they're sincere, I'm not saying they're knowingly being deceitful about how sincere they are in their searching of God. There can be lots of things going on in the heart of a human where they feel they are sincerely looking. I've seen atheists who bring a divine hiddenness argument, and the way they do it, it's as though the argument was an afterthought to their atheism. And they say to me how sincere they. I'm not saying every atheist is like this. I'm merely giving one example of one way this can play out. They say like, hey, I'm going to spend a little time like really praying, really going to church, even really maybe singing worship songs, as a way of later being able to say, hey, I sought the Lord, I really tried, and that confirms my atheism one more time. Perhaps the agenda here was a way of proving themselves right about God all along. This is entirely possible. This is how human psychology seems to work.
Okay, so I see that Mr. Winger is kind of walking this back. He realizes that over attack on the sincerity of the person is a little bit harsh. Okay, so he's trying to come up with alternative excuses, like, maybe a person isn't knowledgeable about the blockages that they have with God. I'm sure he's going to bring in sin sooner or later. I'm sure he's going to engage this problem, from a lot of different angles. But, the atheist hypothetical is very interesting because I hear a lot of apologists bring this up where, you have this hypothetical atheist that goes to the altar, prays, seeks God, all this other stuff. And then they'll say, well, but they were already biased towards being an atheist, and so they didn't find anything, so that just kicks in their confirmation bias toward atheism. That would be a valid point if I ever saw an atheist do that. But it also works the other way, okay? I think Mr. Winger's problem is he doesn't realize that also works the other way, that you can have somebody who also has a confirmation bias of actually hearing from God or having an emotional experience with God. And so they begin to interpret all that stuff through that lens as well. So it cuts both ways. So I'm not really sure that this does anything. And anybody who's actually struggling with divine hiddenness would kind of see that. Okay, I think they're going to instinctively see, well, you're blaming me. Okay, you're attacking me. And, that's not really the issue. The issue is, where is this proactive God that loves me? Okay, where is he? And I don't see him, and I don't see him acting. What answer do you have for that? And what Mr. Winger has basically done is dodged that question. He's moved it. Now, maybe in the rest of the video, he'll fix that, but I don't think he will.
What I'm suggesting is divine hiddenness requires a certain kind of person that may not exist. Against this is quite a number of people who suggest, and they give their testimony, that they did seek the Lord and they did find him. They did cry out to God and he did answer. They did open the Word of God. They did start praying. They did start attending church or something like this, and they started seeking the Lord, and then their lives were radically transformed. And every one of those testimonies would seem to be an argument against this divine hiddenness thing.
Yep, called it. Okay, but here's the thing. If you're going to say that that's an insincere thing against, when an atheist seeks after God and doesn't find him, and that's just confirmation bias already, that he already didn't believe and he wasn't going to find anything anyway because of the lack of sincerity. And you're kind of saying, well, nobody who really sincerely seeks God will not find him. And then you're going to flip the script and say, well, all these people that do seek him and find him seem to be a counter to that argument. Well, if you're going to sit there and say it's confirmation bias on one side, it could be confirmation bias on the other. This is why personal experiences don't really prove anything. I've continued to say this over and over. You can interpret your personal experiences any which way you choose, and so they're slippery. They're not something to really hang your hat on as to whether something is genuine or true. And Mr. Winger has just demonstrated why that is true, whether he intended to or not. Because what he's saying is, well, all these people that do seek him and find him seem to be proof against the divine hiddenness argument. No, it just proves that confirmation bias can be on one side or the other. It doesn't really prove anything, and that's the problem. Because you're still avoiding the ultimate question, where is your proactive, loving God? Where is he, on this side of a relationship? What you're basically doing is you're attacking the person that you sold the product to. They must not be sincere, And if I'm Mike, the guy who wrote the question, I'm sitting here at this point, so I'm the problem. It's not God who's the problem, I'm the problem. Now, if he's a naive type of Christian, then maybe he'll buy that, but I don't think so. The fact that he brought up the New Testament argument tells me that he's sincerely seeking another philosophical argument or a theological argument that will bolster his case against the idea of divine hiddenness or the fact that God is silent. So it's this sincerity of the question tells me that this person genuinely is sincere about this argument. And what Mr. Winger has done is basically poo-pooed his sincerity and is now attacking that sincerity, And then saying, hey, all these other people have found God. Why can't you? It must be something wrong with you. And we'll see what he thinks is wrong.
The problem with the divine hiddenness argument, though, is not the logical aspect of it. Because I can easily say, hey, humans have all sorts of layers of desires and wants. We may be sincere in one level, but insincere in another. We might be in bondage to sin. Our blindness right now in seeking God might be due to past sins we've committed that have brought us to that blindness. So we might be actually reaping the blindness of our own decisions, and we're blaming God for that inability to see him. Like, I can say all those things, but what really makes this one hard, Mike, is that what I'm doing is I'm talking about like your buddy Joe. I mean, in your head, like I'm talking about your friend Joe who told you, I want to see God, I want to know. And use this not just as, hey, pray for me, I want to see God, but use this as an argument against God's existence.
Yep, called it. We got too much sin in my life. We got all this stuff. And he's about to kind of flip the script again, try to, and he says, oh, hey, why are you using your so far inability to find God as an argument against God's existence when other people have found him? And I can already hear the framing of this because either we're not sincere enough in our faith and actually looking for him, or, we're going to get offended if you attack us personally, which this is a personal attack. No matter how much Mr. Winger tries to explain it as something else, he's definitely engaged in a personal attack on the sincerity of people and on the sincerity of the atheist. Now, I want to point something out here. The guy who asked this question isn't an atheist. He wants to bolster his argument against the hiddenness of God. And so And in a particular type of God, we may not even be dealing with atheism here at all. We may be dealing with, is this a proper concept of God, to think that God loves people and intervenes in their life and wants to have a relationship with them? You can have a deist God and not necessarily have this problem, but Winger is going to kind of like head a different direction here. And to be honest, he's pretty much avoided the major part of the hiddenness of argument of God. He's going to blame the atheist, and then he's going to blame the seeker, but he is never going to blame the apologist for having a really crappy argument about the existence of God.
I mean, you can almost here's a way to test maybe for an atheist. If you're sincerely seeking God and you really want to find him, why are you using your so far lack of finding him as a way of arguing for others to not believe in him? Right? Like, this shows there's something going on here other than just a sincere seeking. So my thought is, the hard part is that people then make it personal. Mike's not talking about this logical argument about God and his existence or whatever. Mike's talking about me. He's attacking me personally. He's, by making the argument depend upon if I'm the atheist, depend upon my sincerity and my integrity, I then come into currently in our culture, a very advantageous position for arguing, where I get to say, anyone who disagrees with me on this hiddenness thing is attacking me personally. They're attacking my sincerity. They're attacking my integrity. They're attacking my story. They're attacking my life, my lived experience. And that alone is incredibly persuasive for people, especially in our current culture. And for that, I go, okay, well, let's just acknowledge what's going on here. You're turning the existence of God into either I agree with you that you have good reason to think God doesn't exist, or you see me as personally attacking you because you've based your argument upon your own integrity and your own sincerity and the thoroughness and purity of your own search for God.
So we're going to engage in a personal attack against atheists, saying we question their sincerity, and then say, well, it's a personal attack. Is that what we're saying? Okay, let me steel man this a little bit. What you're saying is that we have this dichotomy. Either I have to accept that you have good reasons to not believe in God, or I end up attacking you personally, and so then you get offended. And in our culture, that becomes, oh, well, you're attacking me personally. Project much? Because I have lost track of the number of discussions I've had with theists about their doctrine, their theology, their belief in God, their arguments for the existence of God. And, well, I'm offended. And so I can easily turn that around and say, well, I'm talking to you theists, but hey, one way or another we have a problem. Either, I don't accept your arguments for the existence of God, or I'm offending you because I'm challenging you personally, because I'm challenging your beliefs. That cuts both ways, Mr. Winger. Okay, and amazingly, not so amazingly, you bring in the culture war of offense. But I really think that this is a false dichotomy, okay? Because I don't really care if you attack my sincerity of my unbelief or my sincerity of seeking God and not finding him. What I'm interested in the Divine Hiddenness Argument, which you did not address so far in this entire video, is how a proactive, loving God can exist and yet remain hidden. Okay, if God truly is desirous of a relationship with every single human being, and he actively wants to show his love to them, and if the scriptures, the Christian scriptures, indicate that he's searching out, trying to find people that are seeking him, where is he? Okay, and see, what you've done is a very clever bait and switch. It's an interesting sales technique. You say you're talking about the Divine Hiddenness Argument, you present it very well, but then you're only going to deal with half of it. You're only going to, let's get rid of the philosophical arguments, even though that's what your questioner was asking for, was better philosophical arguments, better theological arguments as to why God would remain hidden, even though he proactively loves people. You haven't given any of those. Instead, you sidestep, attack the sincerity of the person seeking, and then walk it back a little bit, but then do it again. Okay, Vice Rhino was really nice to you. I'm not going to be that nice. You dodged this question. you absolutely dodge half of the question of divine hiddenness. Because the other half of divine hiddenness calls into question the attributes of God, that you say he's a loving God that proactively seeks out people that are seeking for him, and yet somehow he still remains hidden to people that genuinely seek him. And I don't think sin has anything to do with it. Let's tackle that for a minute, because you brought that up several times. But so what does sin in present? A sinner who comes to the altar, according to your theology, is a sinner. There's still a major blockage between them and their relationship with God, is there not? Is that not the whole doctrine of salvation right there? And so they still are a sinner. And so until they confess with their mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, believe that Jesus Christ is raised from the dead, cry out to God and you'll be saved. Until they do that, isn't that them seeking out God as a sinner and then finding God, even though they have sin in their life at the time? I think the whole sin argument is garbage theologically, and always felt so. But I want to get more, I'm going to finish up the video, what he has to say, and then I'm going to wrap it up because I'm kind of done with this guy. He kind of frustrates me.
And the bottom line, though, is I don't think, Mike, that this should stumble you in your walk with God. Have you sought the Lord and found him? Why would you stop believing him because someone else says that they seek the Lord and don't find him? I would question the accuracy of those claims. They would say I'm personally attacking them. At least they potentially would. And I'd be okay with that. I'd be like, well, you brought it up. Like, you're the one that laid out your sincerity as the rule by which you will test God's existence. I'm saying I don't think that's a trustworthy rule.
Okay, so he concludes basically where I thought he was going to go. You say you're sincerely seeking him, and that's the crux of your divine hiddenness argument, so therefore I'm going to... But once again, Mr. Winger did not address half of the divine hiddenness argument in this one. He sidestepped it by making it a personal attack on the sincerity of the person, which is a personal attack, by the way, and then turns it, around, well, you say you're sincere, I say you're not. And that's the sum total of his response to the divine hiddenness argument. He doesn't anyway take on the he literally at the beginning kind of poisons the well against the philosophical arguments, which is funny because he's an apologist, and then immediately goes into the whole emotional side of it. I can have the logical reasons of questioning your sincerity, but that's not really a logical reason. That's an emotional thing. That is a judgment call thing. It's an intuitive thing of whether somebody's being sincere. Okay, I can tell you for a fact that I sincerely believed in all this stuff, and slowly but surely began to realize that all of these other things could be something else. I can easily do the same thing you just did, Mr. Winger, which is attack the sincerity of your belief. I attack the sincerity of your experiences with God. I think you've been indoctrinated into your faith, and so therefore any experience you have, any emotional experience, anytime you feel like you got an answer to prayer or whatever, you're going to interpret it through the indoctrinated lens of God exists. I can do that too, okay? And we'd both be equally wrong for doing so, okay? Attacking somebody's sincerity is a personal attack. And yeah, I think sometimes people have the right to be offended at it, but I think it's a false dichotomy to sit there and say, well, I either have to accept your arguments against God or I'm attacking you personally, and in our culture, that's just not acceptable. The divine hiddenness argument existed long before offense culture. It existed long before I'm offended, okay? And it was a serious question about the proactive nature of a God who sincerely loves people and wants a relationship with them, okay? It's not necessarily an atheist thing. It's a certain type of God thing. Deists can still say that God is a creator God, but doesn't necessarily have the attributes of wanting a personal relationship with any of his creations. He has better things to do. And so it's not necessarily an atheist argument against the existence of God. It's kind of against a particular type of God, a God that loves and cares about people. Okay, and that's what you're really doing. Now, I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Winger. You keep responding to the hiddenness argument this way, and you will make more unbelievers. Because it's this kind of responses that I used to hear from apologists that used to drive me nuts. Because it's like, I'm being sincere here. I'm sincerely still seeking God and still seeking his will, still trying to figure things out. And I'm not hearing from him. And I don't see him. And I now see that there's a whole bunch of alternative explanations of what I see and how I perceive things. And then you apologists come along, and all you really do is attack me. I want to let you know something, Mr. Winger. You didn't just attack the atheist. You attacked the guy that gave you the question. Okay, you attacked his sincerity. Well, you're not really, you got sin in your life, or you got something else, or you got all this other crap, and you attacked him. And it's like, how do you expect to keep people in the believing camp if you attack people with sincere questions, if you question their sincerity? It's a dishonest salesman tactic to question the customer all the time. Okay? Now, sure, there's times that customers don't know how to use the product, and you can say, well, have you tried this, this, and this? Okay? I think like people like Richard Foster are a little bit more honest, because he says, well, try meditation, try prayer, try fasting, try this, different things to put yourself in a better position to hear from God. Now, I think that's all woo and nonsense now, but the fact of the matter is, he at least is sincerely saying, maybe there is a problem with you. Let me give you some suggestions, and I'm not going to blame you. I'm not going to call you a sinner or anything like that. On the flip side, you have people like Winger who basically say, hey, you're the problem. But you never really address the divine hiddenness argument at all, because you only address the half of it that's emotional. You never really did the logical side, and that's what your questioner, Mike, was asking for. He was asking for, do you have any other evidence besides this New Testament thing? And you didn't give him anything. You just turned it back on him and questioned him. And that is the greatest way to send people to the unbelieving camp, because I know it did for me. I'm like, well, none of these people are actually dealing with the divine hiddenness argument, the logical half of it. And so they're basically admitting they don't have a good argument against it. And so instead, they're going to attack my sincerity. You're not attacking the sincerity of the atheist. You're attacking the sincerity of the questioner, the person that would dare even have that question. You know what, Mike, Mr. Winger, keep it up. Because your kind of apologetics is what's going to keep pushing people into the unbelieving camp every single day. Because people are going to come to you with sincere questions, and you're going to blow them off. And that's exactly what you did in this video. You blew him off because you didn't really answer his question about divine hiddenness that he was looking for. And now he's going to go away from this, and if he did have emotional struggles, you've amplified them. Because now he's like, well, he didn't really give me an answer. Okay? He didn't really give me an answer to half the problem. And he knows that. And you didn't treat him like a genuine human being with concerns, and who genuinely has sincerely tried to find him, but God isn't meeting him. I mean, you could have made a lot of other arguments, but instead you blamed him. And it's like, it's that kind of apologetics where you blame the customer instead of the product, where instead you look at the product and maybe there's something wrong with the product, that is going to continue to push people into my camp, closer to me as the atheist, closer to agnosticism, or I don't know. Or closer to, I don't really think that the Christian God is a real one. Maybe the deist God is real. But the one thing for sure, Mr. Winger, keep up with those apologetics, and we'll have more atheists. Absolutely. Thanks for your work. Thanks for everybody for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. I hope this has been an interesting video for you. I really find responding to Mr. Winger somewhat distasteful at times. But, this one was one that kind of caught my attention when I saw Vice Rhino deal with it. I'll leave the link to his video in the description, because he deals with a lot more of the issues than I did. I just wanted to put my rabid atheist spin on it, and some of my own personal problems with this argument over the years, and how I really got tired of every time somebody was talking about divine hiddenness, the apologists would put it back on the person, well, you weren't really sincerely seeking. Or they would attack atheism as if atheists are the only one that make this argument. I don't know. Maybe if you apologists get a little bit better at actually assuming that you people that are asking questions are sincere, and you should give a better answer based on the assumption of their sincerity instead of, well, maybe you're not really all that sincere about your seeking of God, then maybe you'll get somewhere. But current state, not going to happen. So thanks once again for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe, as I said before. As always, live your best life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. So make sure you take all your time, your money, your opportunities, and put them into yourself, put them into the people you love and care for, and making this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't put it into the trappings of faith and religion, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.